TradeSquare is Australia's first business-to-business marketplace connecting people, brands and organisations into this diverse ecosystem in a unique global landscape. Through pivoting, transforming and reshaping, Australian businesses have an opportunity to create the model for the future that aligns with the world's needs and leveraging the power of a collaborative approach. Through the TradeSquare podcast, we will bring together dynamic, diverse and thought-provoking leaders from business, government and organisations to have conversations to further enable new thinking for the future. Welcome to TradeSquare, Australia's leading business-to-business marketplace. I'm Catherine Vandermeulen, and on this series we are connecting to Australian women changing the world with technology. Today we're chatting to Divya Mehta, the Associate Professor at Queensland University of Technology. How are you, Divya?
Hi, Kat. How are you?
Great to have you as part of our podcast.
Thank you.
We always like to start with the most challenging question to begin with. Who is Divya Mehta?
Yeah, so identity is a very interesting thing. And, we all have so many different identities. So I guess at home, I am a mother, I am a daughter, and I am a wife. At work, I am a geneticist, a biostatistician, I'm a team leader, a scientific communicator, I'm also a mentor.
Wow, so many different roles within that. So can you adventure to join QUT and the work that you do now?
Sure. So I joined QUT in 2015. I was offered an exciting opportunity to establish my own independent research group in the field of stress genomics. So what I do, I'm a geneticist, and I analyze big data to better understand how our genes and our environment contribute towards our mental health and well-being.
Wow, I think you're going to have to unpack that even further. I really want to learn more about stress genomics. Can you break that down for me and what that actually looks like?
Yeah, sure. So our mental health and well-being is driven by our genes and our environment. Our DNA code is what we inherit from our parents, and this does not change during our lives. What changes, however, is the activity of our genes. So our gene activity can go up and down in response to a range of different environmental and lifestyle factors. So things such as stress, but also exercise, diet, all of this can change our gene activity. So my research is looking at different kinds of stressors in a range of different populations. So we're looking at the general population, we're looking at veterans, emergency responders, university students. And what we look at is how these changes in gene activity are driven by a range of positive and negative psychological and social factors. So basically, why do we all respond differently to stress, and what makes some of us resilient to stress, and what makes some of us get depression or post-traumatic stress disorder or any other kind of stress-related.
And so what are some of the biggest focuses in your role that support Australian organisations?
So I, of course, lead my own research team. So my group is called the Stress Genomics Group, but I'm also a program and a domain lead within two major research centers at QUT. So the Center for Genomics and Personalized Health and the Center for Data Science. So through these roles, I provide research training and I mentor students and staff. I also teach at the university. So I teach genetics and statistics at the undergraduate and the master's levels at Queensland University of Technology.
And so thinking about stress, what are the key factors within stress that really enable different activations in our mindset, I guess? And where do organizations play a role in those stress contributors as well?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I wish I knew the answer to that, but I can just tell you what we've found so far. So, as I mentioned, one of the major focus of my research is trying to identify the positive and the negative drivers of the stress response. We've got some very interesting recent data that shows that social structures play an important role in how we respond to stress. So when I talk about social structures, there are different social structure. So one is family and community support, and the other type of social support is a sense of belongingness. So this is how a person feels that they belong to a group, to an organization. So what we did in our study is we looked at when they started their course. So this was, the first time they've just started their course. We collected samples from them, looking at their genes, and we collected a range of different psychological and social factors, about their health and their lifestyle. And then at about 6 or 12 months into their course, the paramedical students go, they have their first field experience. So this is a highly stressful event where a lot of them see, car crashes, deaths, suicides, events related to children. So it's highly stressful. And then at the end of their course, so at the end of the first year, we again collect samples from them to look at their genes, and again looking at their different social and health data. So what we have seen in these paramedical students is that all of them have experienced very similar levels and similar types of stressors. However, the paramedical students who said that they had higher levels of social support, so this is, as I said, friends, family, community, or it could be organization that you work for, and the paramedical students also who had higher levels of the belongingness, so who felt that they belonged and they were well supported by the organization or by a group, did much better and had a lower rates of mental health disorders and mental health outcomes following this exposure to stress. So this was very interesting for us because it just shows us that something very simple, things that we might take for granted, things like social support, belongingness, plays a very important and protective role against stress.
So part of the work that you do is focused on enabling scientific communication. What does this look like, and how is that impacting the work that you do?
So I'm scientific communication. One thing that I believe in is that scientific communication is as important as science itself. So I always tell people, if you cannot communicate your science, you might as well have never done it. I communicate my research widely through media, podcasts, interviews, and I also present regularly at community workshops and events. I think communication, scientific communication is so important because it brings out the passion and purpose of research. It reminds me every time why I do what I do, why I love doing what I do. And finally, it really gives me a true meaning to my work. It makes me look at my research in a very different way and understand it better.
We love the things that bring true meaning to our work, something that we are forever talking about and forever advocating for.
Yeah.
So, Divya, as an advocate and leader in STEM, how is this activated in the work that you do and share with organizations?
So I am currently a Science and Technology Australia superstar of STEM. I'm also a Queensland tall poppy and a flying scientist. So what I do is I am a very passionate and active advocate for STEM. I speak about STEM at schools, government organization, public events. I mainly talk about what kind of role STEM plays an integral role in all of our lives. So I talk about that, and I talk about the different career opportunities that STEM has to offer. But most importantly, when I speak to students in school, they're very interested in knowing who I am, where I come from, and they really want to know a lot about my STEM journey. So they just want to understand what made me a geneticist, what made me come here to Australia. And I keep telling them, I guess my main take-home message to everyone is that STEM is a journey. It's not really a destination. And my career, trajectory, my career path is a very good example of how you start somewhere and then, kind of follow your passion for STEM, and it takes you to your final career, where you just end up doing what you love.
And so what's a key message that you are passionate about, that you are advocating and championing through your work?
So the key message from my research is that our DNA is not our destiny. So there are a lot of, let's say, myths about DNA. And often when I talk to people, people say, oh, I'm born with bad genes, good genes, and things like that. However, we see, and as I've explained to you about the activity of our genes. So the gene activity is something that is dynamic, and it changes throughout our lives. And therefore, what our research has shown, and what my main message to everyone is that by changing our lifestyle factors, we can influence the activity of our genes, and therefore we can be a driver of our own mental health and well-being. So this is really important, and really kind of debunking some of the myths that people have about DNA, genes, and genetics in general.
And so, what are some of the hot topics in your office at the moment that you are getting excited about?
I already mentioned, I guess, about the social structures and the belongingness. And in the last couple of years through the pandemic, there's been huge rates of mental health disorders, higher levels of anxiety, of depression. There's been physical and in some cases even social isolation. And the fact that very simple things such as increased social support is important, and increased social support can fight in a way the stress of our genes is really fascinating. And this is the kind of avenue that I'm taking my research into, because I'm really interested in understanding protective factors which we can change, which we can alter, because there are certain things such as stress, which is everywhere. We cannot really do much about it. We depending on which career path we are, or specific personal lifestyle factors, we will face stress in some way or the other. So in fact, statistics shows that about 50 to 90% of us face at least one stressor during our lifetime, and we cannot change that. But by understanding these kind of protective factors, we can alter our lifestyle. We've also seen things like exercise. Very simple thing like exercise can change the activity of our genes, and reduce and reverse some of the effects of stress on our genes. So this is really interesting, and these are the hot topics at the moment that we're working on in different groups of people.
And what are some of the actions that people can take to take ownership of their own stress, knowing there's things that we can't change, but knowing there are things that we can change without all of the exterior influences, because they're always going to happen in our lives? What are some of the things that you suggest that where people can really take that ownership on their own mindsets?
Sure. So as I said, exercise is a very big thing. We've looked at veterans who have had a post-traumatic stress disorder. Veterans who have had post-traumatic stress disorder, the ones that exercised regularly, did much better and were much more healthy and resilient to stress. Similarly, very simple things such as mindfulness has been shown to reduce levels of stress, even on our genes. Diet is a very important factor, and plays a very important role in reducing stress. So a really healthy diet is good. Our gut, there's a link between our gut and stress again. So that's where diet comes in. And finally, as I said, a sense of belongingness. So people who feel that they're part of a group. When I say a group, this could be a club, this could, a sports club, or it could be a community. It could be a religious organization. It could be your own organization that you work for. Any kind of support, and kind of sense of belongingness that a person has is very important, and makes a person resilient and deal much better with stress.
So Divya, in this podcast series, we've been connecting with Australian women changing the world through technology. How has technology further enabled the work that you do?
Yeah, so technology plays a major role in my work. In genetics, we've had, in the last few years, we've had scientific technologies that now allow us to measure not just the DNA code in a few minutes, but also we can now measure the impact of the environment on our genes. So, the so-called gene activity that I have mentioned, this can now be measured in as less as a few minutes in individuals. Of course, IT, computing, that kind of technology is important because we end up with so much genetic data that we need to use advanced statistical methods and analytical tools to understand and interpret the results. So really, I think technology underlies most of my research, and it plays a major role in what I am doing.
Well, thank you so much, Divya, for sharing your world and your wisdom with TradeSquare.
Thank you very much, Kath, for having me.
For more information on TradeSquare, head to www.tradesquare.com.au and support Australian business economic recovery and growth with a collaborative approach to the future of business.